Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Philosophy with Faron. Now, today we're taking a deep dive into idealism and holy fucking shit. Like even before the episode starts, I have to say I think this is the greatest episode yet. And mostly, I do this stuff for my own personal research. The YouTube channel is kind of just like a byproduct and a motivation for me to actually educate myself on this stuff. Plus, I do actually study philosophy, so this is literally practically useful for me. But I think this is the video that I most recommend you watch. Like out of all my videos ever, this is the one I think everyone should see because it completely changes your view on reality. First, what scheme will be taken in here when it comes to idealism? Well, just like the classic scheme we take with everything, we'll be talking about what it is, why it is, how it affects us. In this episode, I actually decided to first kind of have like a brief introduction of what idealism is. But right off the bat, I go into reasons to believe in idealism. And the reason for that being is it sounds crazy. Like when you first introduce it to someone, it sounds crazy. The last episode, we talked about the approach to consciousness that is called materialism. And it's very intuitive. We talked about it as if it were true, right? And when you introduce idealism, first off, it sounds stupid. So let's talk about what is idealism. Just so we're on the right note. So when we talked about materialism, what materialism is that it believes that everything is made out of matter, what we call matter, even consciousness. We talked about many theories of what exactly consciousness is from the material point of view. And we said that it can be some neural networks that align correctly. It can be the electromagnetic fields that are above the neurons. We talked about all of that. Now, what idealism is, it's the exact opposite. It says that there's no material, there's nothing like that. It's another form of monism. What monism means is that one substance creates everything. Everything in the outer world plus everything inside of us. So if we were to say materialism is the correct form of monism, we would have to say that our mind is also material. Well, we run into a problem. It's not material. You cannot touch it. It's nowhere. It's not quantitative. It's qualitative. And thus we figure out, well, maybe it's the other way around. Maybe we have to look at the other possibility that one substance is everything, and it is actually idealism. It is mind. And later on in further episodes, we will be discussing other possibilities, other theories on consciousness. Now, let's first off start off with reasons to believe in idealism, because I think what this all stands on is talking about matter itself. You are right now touching your computer or your phone, maybe your cousin's thigh. I don't know what you're touching right now. You may be touching your penis right now. Doesn't matter. When you touch that stuff, you feel the touch. You feel it, and what you think is that it's a physical matter. That it's a real physical matter. You can feel its impact when you punch into it, right? Now we're gonna start off with a little history as to how idealism started. Now, if we were to go back and way back in time, we would find links to idealism in Hinduism. I think Maya. What Maya is like the universal consciousness. Hopefully, I'm not butchering Hinduism. Sorry if I am. But the problem here is it's not that very philosophical. It's a matter of faith, right? They have all these Hinduist things and all of that, and we don't really care about that. We care about philosophy. We care about arguments. And there's this guy called George Berkeley that is exactly that. He is exactly what we need. He is the beginning of idealism from the philosophical perspective, at least in the more mainstream scheme. So who was George Berkeley? He's an 18th century Irish bishop, and he said something very, very important. And the fact that he arrived at this with like no science to back it off, it's insane that he was right. Bear with me now. It's going to sound crazy, but the more we go into it, it's, oh my fucking God. Okay, so this guy said, esse es percipi. Now, in case you know Latin, you already know what I said. In case you don't know Latin, it means that to be is to be perceived. In order for something to be, it has to be perceived. And he had this very famous falling tree paradox. He said that if there's a tree that falls in a forest somewhere, does it make a sound when there's no one there to see it? And, you know, when you first hear this, like I remember when I first heard this, I was like, bro, what the fuck do you mean doesn't make a sound? Of course it makes a sound. And it's just speculations, right? Okay, maybe it doesn't, maybe it doesn't, but like, what do you mean if there's a tree falling in an empty forest doesn't make a sound? Like, how do you, like, we're talking about fucking ghosts here. Like, okay, we don't know, right? Why would it not make a sound? Do we have any proof that it wouldn't? That's what I first thought. Now Berkeley goes and connects all of this with God. What he calls God is the universal consciousness, and thinks they exist when perceived and only when perceived, but thinks the world already exists. So he says that the God must have existed in order to bring all of this into existence, in order this like simulation would not be running, right? And okay, sure. At least that's how I understand it. Now, when I first heard this, I thought of the double slit experiment. Now, you might have heard of this experiment. It's a very popular one. And it just shows how much behind the general public, the general knowledge of us peasants is when it comes to physics. And you know, there's a reason for that, because physics is fucking boring. Whenever we were learning physics in school, I did not like it, man. It's just like, it's a very hard subject in and of itself, but it's a very hard subject to get some interest in when it comes into the students. Imagine being a physics professor. That's like the worst punishment. How do you make this shit interesting? It's very difficult. And this experiment is proof of how far behind we are, because a lot of people, you would think that, oh my god, the double slit experiment, yeah, I heard of that. This proves that when something is not observed, it behaves differently. No, it fucking doesn't. No, it doesn't. This experiment doesn't prove that. It's a false assumption the general public has. I even saw a guy on Instagram. He had like a bio, and his bio was like, he's an electron in a double slit. I was like, what does that even mean? Like, are you a narcissist because you behave differently when observed, or what is that even supposed to mean? What's important? Okay, so let's get right into what the experiment is, in case you haven't heard of it. So it's the year 1961. Quantum physics is already discovered. We will be talking about more what quantum physics is. But what you just need to know right now, imagine it this way. You have a gun. You shoot it into two slits in the wall, right? There's like a wall, and there's two rectangular holes. And then behind that wall is another wall. And you're able to see where the particles have landed. Now, if you observe the particles and you measure them while they are shooting themselves into that first wall, they behave like little tiny balls. They actually travel through these two rectangular slits, and they leave behind on the second wall. Like, think of it as like a graffiti. If you were to spray through the first wall with the two rectangular slits, it's like a pause sign, like the pause sign on your remote controller. If you were to spray through it with like a spray can, it will obviously leave the same thing as the motive. Now, that's what happens when the particles are being measured. It's much better. In case you're just listening, I really do recommend watching the screen right now. Now, when the particles were not being observed, they were not being measured, what happened was the pattern left behind was different. It was like a lot of rectangles. Now, the explanation here is that these particles, they actually behaved like waves. They behaved like waves, and they made this whole different pattern. And this was like a huge discovery. In the year 1961, people were like, holy fucking shit. This Berkeley guy, he was right. He was right all along. This fucking Irish biscuit. What does he know about physics? Nothing, but he was right, bro. And that's the most insane stuff. Guess what? He wasn't. It's the year 1998. And there's an institute in Israel called the Weizmann Institute. And there, in fact, were some very wise and intelligent men in this institute in Israel. Out of all the places, it's Israel. And they thought, you know what if we just like slowly weaken the detector? And they found out that, oh no, it's not the fact that the particles, they behave differently when being observed. No, it's just the detector that's disrupting the characteristics of them. And when they weakened the detector, they behaved the same, no matter if they were observed or not. So Berkeley wasn't right. Well, guess what? We go to the year 1900. And now we have to talk about quantum physics. Because even though this experiment didn't prove anything, other experiments did. And this is where stuff gets weird. Now, quantum physics is something that sounds very fancy and very complicated. It's not fancy. It is complicated. It is fucking complicated stuff. It is complicated as shit. But there's nothing fancy about this. It's painful. There is nothing fancy about it. It's very painful to learn about. And I do not recommend being interested in this because you will not understand it. I have come from not knowing what it is and not understanding it to kind of knowing what it is and not understanding it even more. But there's an important lesson we will learn. So, what is quantum physics? Imagine an image you look at. It's made out of pixels. You know that, right? And you zoom in and you zoom in and you zoom in. And now suddenly, what looked just like the color red is like 10 pixels. And one is a little black, one is very brown, one is genuinely like bright red. Now you zoom in more on those pixels and you zoom in on that little red pixel. It's like the smallest pixel. Now you know the image is made of what, like 12,000 pixels, whatever. You zoom in on this one singular pixel. No matter how much further you zoom in on that pixel, it will always be this bright red color. And it is exactly what our world is. The smallest particles possible are these subatomic particles. Now, an atom, you might have heard of this, is not the smallest. It's still made up of smaller particles. What's interesting is that an atom is 99.9% empty space. But then there are these electrons and protons and whatnot. We don't really need to know the details, right? We're philosophers. We don't really have to give a fuck about physics. It's the important thing is it's like the smallest thing. Even if you keep zooming in on it, it's not going to change. It's still going to be the same thing, right? It doesn't have anything smaller in it. It's just like that pixel analogy with the image. Now, a fun fact with this is that it was actually discovered by the German scientist Max Planck, and it was discovered kind of accidentally. There was this big thing called the ultraviolet catastrophe. Now, apparently, the way I understand it, and please, if you understand it more, write in the comments. I'd be very happy to get educated on this, even though I have already read a lot about it. I'm just trying to convey it in a more simple manner. Back then, there was a belief that radiation and all of these waves, they just travel like water, like flows of water. But when mathematicians and physicists actually did the maths on radiation traveling from ovens, it turned out that we would all fucking die. Like, that pretty much was the math. And this Max Planck guy was like, what if it doesn't travel in waves, in like flows like a river? It travels in little small particles. And it turned out the math actually made sense. And this is how this guy discovered the smallest thing possible. That is why it's called the Planck length. Might have heard that. And I always thought, what does that even mean, the smallest thing possible? Can't you just keep like endlessly zooming in? I think you can keep endlessly zooming in, but there wouldn't be no fundamental building block of reality left. The quantum physics is the smallest building block of reality. So we discovered that, and what's up with that? Well, what's more important is a thing called quantum entanglement. Now, imagine a dark room and there's like a fucking spinning coin. It's spinning around. It's spinning very, very, very fast. It's either going to land on tails or heads. Now, you're in a dark room. You cannot see this coin. When you fire a laser onto that coin, it's going to stop and it's going to show either heads or tails. But you can only see it after firing that laser on it. And that is exactly how scientists measure these quantum particles. Think of it this way, like it's probably not very science accurate, but they fire lasers into like a dark room, and that's how they're able to see these quantum particles, the coin. And obviously, we wouldn't know that the coin is spinning endlessly. When you just shine the light on it, you would just think it was always on the tails position, right? Now, a very sussy thing happened. It's called quantum entanglement. So somehow, let's not try and go deep into understanding the science here. One source can create more particles. I'm guessing it's like the laser, you fire it into the dark and then somehow it creates more of these particles. Listen, I don't really understand it, right? What's more important is that when one source creates more of these quantum particles, they become entangled. They become like your balls in your ball sack. They're like forever connected, but they don't have the ball sack, right? They're just like in empty space. One can fly one way, the other can fly one way. So you might think, what do you mean? How are they entangled? Well, here's the twist. I told you before measuring, you don't know what quality the quantum particle has. It's not like a ball. It's not like a tennis ball that you're going to measure it with a ruler and you already see the tennis ball and everything, and you're just measuring how long it is. No, you don't know anything about it. Just after measuring, you discover its qualities. Now, these particles that are linked, even though they're not like physically linked, they can each fly their own way, do their own thing, whatever. If you measure one of them, the opposite one is always going to show the very opposite measurement to the first one. And that happens faster than the speed of light. So one source creates two of these particles. You measure one of them, instantaneously you measure the other one, and the other one is going to show, if you measure the same thing, it's going to show exactly the opposite measurement. And that's pretty fucking weird. That's pretty weird. It's like you imagine those two spinning coins flying in the air. You measure one of them, it shows tails, and you measure the other one, it always shows the opposites. So it always shows heads. There's this whole fun experiment. It's very popular in physics, and I think it's worth a mention. It's called Alice and Bob. Now, since scientists figured out this happens, they made this fun experiment. So think of Alice is a woman, very beautiful. Bob is a man, he's not so beautiful. No, okay, those details, they don't matter. So they're just two people, Alice, Bob. Alice is on the planet Venus. She can be as far as she wants to. Bob is on the planet Mars. We managed to send each one of them an entangled particle. And no matter how far these particles are, faster than the speed of light, if Alice and Bob were both to measure at the exact same time, these two particles, Bob measures his particle, and a nanosecond after, Alice measures her particle, they would show exactly opposite measures. And why is it such a big deal that it's happening faster than the speed of light? Because Einstein's relativity and physics in general believes that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, because it's this whole thing with time. It would have to travel back in time. Just take it as a fact. I know it's tough to say to a philosopher, not question it, but don't question it, okay? It's physics, and things just cannot travel faster than light, as far as I understand. That's all we need to know. Now, this is pretty sussy. If these particles were the true crewmates in an Among Us crew, we would have to vote them out, because they are, I think, the imposters. No, but genuinely, this is weird stuff, right? So what happened with this? Well, we have this guy, pretty intelligent fellow, I would say. He's got a pretty sharp mind around his head. His name is Albert Einstein. Now, Albert Einstein, he believed in local realism. And when we heard this whole thing with these entangled particles communicating faster than the speed of light, he said, okay, listen, locality means that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. Realism means that objects have set properties. Einstein believed that everything has set properties. And he explained that, listen, these particles, there's no communication going on. They just have set DNA. Before measuring them, it is predetermined what they're going to show. It's already they have a set DNA in them. Of course, they're going to measure as opposites, because that's how they are born. They're born from one source. And if we measure one particle, it's just going to show what it was always going to show. And they were already born this way. They have a secret DNA in them. He even called this quantum entanglement spooky action at a distance. A very freaky line of his. It's apparently very popular. Whole fucking videos from physics titled around this. And I was astonished how big of a deal it is that Einstein said spooky action at a distance. It's sounds like some storytelling from my uncle at the birthday party about how they fucking got a blowjob from some local prostitute. Listen, he said that God does not play dice with the universe. So Einstein, he thought that, listen, guys, there's nothing crazy going on. There's DNA. It's all set. But then comes a guy. His name is Bohr. Now, this guy, he must have been quite the bore, because he said to Einstein, no, this is not the way it is. I bring you the Copenhagen interpretation. It's a very popular interpretation to this day. And it says that, Einstein, there is no fucking DNA. There are no set properties. These particles are in what we would call superposition. I'm not sure if he came up with the term superposition, but I'm just saying it because a lot of people know it. You might have heard of Schrodinger's cat. And now you kind of understand it a bit more. The cat is always dead and alive at the same time. In case you haven't heard, the experiment goes the way that you put a cat in the box, but you don't actually look at the cat. You cannot see the cat. She's in the box. And at the same time, she is both alive and dead until you look at her. This is this whole superposition. So Einstein imagined the spinning a coin in the dark, he didn't imagine it spinning endlessly, right? He said that it's already been on tails and the other one it's already been on heads. But this guy, Bohr, with the Copenhagen interpretation, he imagined that the coin is spinning, 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 and once we measure it, it stops and shows some property. The measurement is the collapse of this superposition. The problem was, though, there was no proof behind this. This is just pure philosophy and, like no tests, no experiments, nothing to really prove this. So eventually, smart people have done experiments. It's all tied to Bell's inequality, but we don't really have to care about that because it's too complicated. I will try to explain this in a much more simple manner, just so you kind of understand what's going on. Hopefully, you get the picture. I really do recommend watching this section right now, if any part of the video, just so you understand how Einstein was proven wrong. So, look what we have here. We have 8 different combinations or 3 different angles you can measure the quantum particle. Now, lab 1 is the lab that's going to be measuring the first entangled particle, and lab 2 is what's going to be measuring the second entangled particle. Now, if we just measure those 2 particles at the same property, at the same angle, it's always going to be the opposite. And if we just do that, well, Einstein can just say it's predetermined, it's DNA. But here's the twist. If we look at the predetermined combinations, let's say we measure the first particle in angle A, and we get the result of the arrow up, green arrow up. Now, the rows that align with this are the rows 1, 3, 4, and 5. Now we know that if we were to measure the second particle, we would always get in the position A the arrow down. It's 100% guaranteed. We have empirically proven that. But here's a twist. We're not going to do that. We're going to measure the second particle in position B. Now, if we look at all the rows, we have measured the first particle in position A, we get the result up. Now, if we look at all the different rows where this result is present, we see that if we measure the second particle in position B, we have 2 arrows down and 2 arrows up. So we have exactly a 50% chance to get the result of arrow down and arrow up. But when scientists actually did this experiment, it wasn't 50%, it wasn't split at all. It turned out one result kept showing up 25% of the time and the other 75% of the time. So clearly, this was proof that there is no predetermined DNA. Once you measure the first particle, the other one physically changes. Why are we connecting this with idealism and the whole tree in the forest thing? Well, remember Einstein, he said that local realism, locality, nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. Yeah, sure, we agree with that. But realism, that everything has predetermined properties? No, clearly, once we measure the first entangled particle, it affects how the other one is going to behave. So it doesn't have set properties. It is affected by the act of measurement. Measurement creates matter. It ends the superposition of the quantum particle and it forces it to choose one position, which then influences reality. So reality is actually brought into life, as you will, by measurement. And if you think about it this way, human senses, they are also measurement. We know this from science. There is light waves that come into your eyes, and what eyes do, they exactly measure it, send the code into your brain, and now we know from science that your brain reenacts reality. That's why we were able to see optical illusions. So not only that we know reliably that what we're seeing, we're not evolutionarily programmed to see reality, we also know that reality is brought into existence by the act of measurement, by consciousness itself. So mind is automatically above matter in this regard. Matter has to be something, it has to be a construct of the mind. So Berkeley was right. And that's just crazy, right? In today's day and age, the common explanation is that there's quantum fields. That is the fundamental of reality. Now, one idealist that I've been studying a lot, and we will be talking about him, says that it's just a convenient explanation. So I don't know. But the big lesson here is the fact that matter, as we see it, is not real. There's no materialism. It's not possible. It's not scientific. It seems real, but Matter of fact, when we go back onto the Occam's razor, we have talked about the Occam's razor in materialism. It makes more sense to use it on the mind. Now, what Occam's razor is that there was this philosopher in the Middle Ages, since it was like 13th century, I think, was very into the church and stuff and whatever. But he got a cool philosophical concept. He said that when there are multiple explanations, do not bring in external entities. Use the more simple explanation. The common example here is that I've already used before is that when your door suddenly slams open, then and no one is there, then use the more simple explanation that it was the wind and don't just bring in external entities. It's kind of ironic that this guy believed in God. It's like, okay, but whatever. And I used to think that this is how we connected with materialism. I got this great recommendation from one of my close friends, my classmate in philosophy, and he said that you can actually connect materialism with Occam's razor. And it made perfect sense to me because all we know is matter. Why would consciousness be something else? But that happens not to be the case. All we know is mind. All we know is what it feels like to touch something. But we don't really know the matter for sure. All we know is our perception of it, our subjective experience, our mind, our consciousness. So it would make more sense to not bring in external entities and not bring in some dead matter to explain consciousness. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what about the brain? All of this, you can clearly see that the brain, if we affect it with the dead material, then it affects how the mind works. But that's not the case. The brain is just the visual representation of how the mind is. Because, our mind creates the perception of matter. That is how it sees the world. And if we want to look at the mind, then the representation of our biological processes is the brain, and that affects our reality. We're kind of like with this permanent filter, it filters our reality. That is an evolutionary mechanism, what the brain is. But consciousness is not the brain. Consciousness sees the brain. Now, how do I prove this though? Because you can say that, brain activity correlates perfectly with consciousness. If you put me on a fMRI scan, depending on what I'm going to be focusing my mind on, it's going to physically affect my brain. And yes, that's true. You can affect this perception of the matter, of the way you see the world. But what's really interesting here is that when you take psychedelics, your brain activity actually reduces. It disrupts your default mode network, or called DMN, and logically, from a materialistic perspective, a reduction in brain activity should be a reduction in consciousness. It's the same with near-death experiences, and it's the same with fighter pilots that lose consciousness under high G-forces. All of this happens, yet the reduced brain activity does not reduce consciousness. Matter of fact, with all of these experiences, you can have the most intense experience of your life. So therefore, the idealistic view on the brain is that it's a visual representation of how the mind processes work, and it is a reduction filter of consciousness. So that's very interesting. Now, we connected with idealism, and we go into types of idealism. So it seems pretty reliable to think that consciousness is the only thing we know for sure. And since Occam's razor tells us to not bring in external entities because that makes stuff more complicated. Because when you think about consciousness dualistically, you think that there is genuinely this outside world made of a different substance, and that consciousness is a different substance from this outside world. Well, it causes the problem of the mind and body problem. How is it possible that these two things communicate if they're substantially different? The same goes for materialism. It thus causes the problem of the hard problem of consciousness. How is it possible that dead matter, somehow aligned, creates qualia, the subjective qualitative quality? What idealism does is that it assumes that everything is consciousness and gets rid of both of these problems. That's why it's a very, very great approach to consciousness. Now, when we look at types of idealisms, we're going to be taking some further inspiration from the site Consciousness Atlas. So I have to shout them out over here. There's over 300 theories in consciousness. Go check it out. There's 9 primary ones set into different categories. Very, very, very well discussed. Primarily, everything is about materialism. When it comes to idealism, there's about 15 theories. So thanks to that, we will be able to talk about specific people that have these theories. Well, when we were talking about materialism, we were just talking about branches of materialism. We weren't really able to go deeply into the people that propose these theories. And what's very important is that they can intertwine. They are very similar, but just different in some little things, right? Well, fundamentally different in their suggestion of the problem that's called the decomposition problem. What the decomposition problem is that how does the universal consciousness, if everything is conscious, how does it split into smaller subconsciousnesses? So we started with the fucking goat. With the fucking goat that I've been citing and inspiring my ass off. Oh my fucking god, Bernardo Kastrup, the legend, the guy each of us should have portrait of on our walls. And it's the guy that got me to all of this. I watched like a 3-hour course from him on idealism, and it changed my mind a lot. I really do recommend that. So this guy has his own view on what consciousness is, on what the whole world is, on how it works, and it's called analytic idealism. So what he thinks is that the universal consciousness is everything. Consciousness is the fundamental of reality, and our world right now that we are in is a dream of the universal consciousness. Now I will explain this in further detail. Don't worry. I know it sounds crazy. What's really important to think about as well is it's like this guy is not some like random dummy. You know, that's just like spiritual guy that like believes in some stupid stuff with no logical explanations. He has a lot of arguments behind it. He's written so many fucking books. He has worked in CERN as like a scientist guy. I don't even know what he did there with like quantum stuff or whatever. He knows his stuff. And it's interesting that when I learned about these people that have their idealistic theories, a lot of them were actually previously very, very well educated scientists and very intelligent people. And I even found out that the guy that discovered quantum physics, the Max Planck guy, he said that he thinks that matter does not exist. That's also interesting. So Bernardo Kastrup, he says that matter is an illusion. It's all in the mind. It's like just like when you have a dream, the matter there, you can touch it. It seems real to you. You have the sensation of feeling stuff in the dream. It feels real, but it is not real. It's just a construct of the mind. Just like when you put a VR headset on. When you put a VR headset on, you can see the physical material all around you. It feels real. But it's not. It's just nothing, right? It's just a construct of the VR headset. So this is the way it works, right? So since it's a dream of the universal consciousness, how come we are all in the same reality? Like, wouldn't it be different? No. He cites this study of DID, dissociative identity disorder. Now, the way this works is that a person's mind constructs alters different characters. And psychiatrists have been able to talk to these alters about a singular dream they all experienced from their own perspective. This is scientifically proven that when a person has DID and has many dissociates and many alters, they can all at the same time experience the same dream at the same time. But since our human consciousness is so like tiny, it's like a fracture of reality, it's a smaller dream, right? But if this universal consciousness has a dream, we are all dissociations of the universal consciousness in its dream, and we are all alters of this universal consciousness experiencing its dream right now. Now, there's two things that come to mind when we think about this. First of all, when I dream, does that mean in my dreams, the people I meet there are actually consciously experiencing the dream? And not like when I meet a person I know, it's probably just still a construct of my mind inspired visually by a person I know. So it's not it's not like other people can access my dreams. There's still like the boundary of my alter. But I'm just like still thinking like if the other alters in my dreams actually, even though when I don't have the ID, does my mind actually create alters in my dreams that actually experience those dreams? So it's very interesting. When I will be having a lucid dream, I so want to try like talking to the people in my dreams and ask them if they experience. But then I don't know who is going to be answering me. Maybe it's very interesting. That's how his theory goes, right? And another important analogy is the plane analogy. He says that thinking that matter is real is like flying in a plane in the mist. You're in the cockpit and you cannot see anything because the mist is very, very gray and thick. And you look at the numbers on the dashboard. You see the height of the plane. You see the humidity of the air, everything like that. And you start to think that this is real. But it's not. It's just a measurement of the outside world. And what the outside world is out there in that mist that you cannot see. The measurements are useful for navigating that plane you are in right now, but it's not reality. This is going to be supported by a further scientist we will be talking about. Now, as for if AI can become consciousness, Kastrup says that no, because it's still just a representation of the world. It's made out of the construct of the mind. So how could it even become conscious? That's impossible. And but what's really interesting is that you can reliably like have children that always become conscious. It's interesting. It's interesting that it works this way. And when it comes to death, well, that would just be returned to the universal consciousness. You would reassociate back into your original mind. So just like those people you would meet in your dream and they would be others of you, even though they experience separately, they have their separate identities, they're all a construct of your mind. We are all on the same level as people, and we are all constructs of this universal consciousness. When we die, we just return to our creator, as per se. Now, what this brings along, what this solves is the decomposition problem. It solves the question of how does the universal consciousness split into subconsciousnesses. It says that we are dissociates of the universal consciousness. Now, another theory that's very interesting is conscious realism. This one is a bit harder to understand. I'm still kind of like trying to wrap my head around it, so I'm sorry if I butcher it. What's more important is the scientific lessons from this guy. His name is Donald Hoffman. I really do recommend checking out his TED Talk about if we see reality, because that's where he talks about a lot of important stuff. Now, his theory is that reality is a social network of minds. There are all of these conscious agents that interact with each other, just like the cells in your body. And you think of like a matryoshka, like the Russian doll, that's like a doll inside a doll inside a doll. When these little consciousnesses interact, they cause the interaction of a higher consciousness. That's why the interactions of the subconsciousnesses inside you cause you, the unified experience of you, and eventually our interaction of all the people causes the universal consciousness. That's at least the way I understand it. So Kastrup, the analytic idealism, is going from up to down, from the universal consciousness down to dissociates. Now Donald Hoffman is doing it the other way around. That's at least the way I understand it, but hopefully I'm not butchering his theory. I'm sorry if I am. Go check it out if you're interested. It seems very interesting. He also says that consciousness is the foundation of reality and that consciousness creates the brain. And what's really important, he said this very well. I really recommend go check out the TED Talk. It's like 20 minutes long, but it feels like 2 minutes. I swear, it's so fucking good. It's so fucking good. My guy says that he's done some tests in his laboratory. He's like a big guy on maths and all of that. And he's done tests for evolution of seeing reality or just seeing what's good for survival. And in every single test, the perception of reality was never evolutionarily preferred. So it's mathematically proven that we just cannot, it just doesn't make sense for us evolutionarily to be programmed to see reality. Just like matter, space-time also itself is an evolutionary construct. It's not us seeing the reality. And he gives us an analogy of the desktop folder, where when you look at your desktop, there's a folder there, right? And even though it looks like a folder to you, in the binary code, it's nothing like a folder. But we would just, it's more convenient for us to orient that way. So what the real fundamental reality is, all of these people argue that it's consciousness, right? And it's hard to imagine what that looks like. Now, he even has like a mathematical diagram of a singular conscious agent, the way it works. So he connects this whole thing to maths and claims that AI consciousness is possible if a complex system is complex enough to tap into the universal consciousness. And when it comes to death, then he obviously says that mind survives matter, because matter is a construct of the mind. So why would it not? Now, the question I didn't really understand with this theory is, how does mind create same matter for everyone? I'm not really sure. Hopefully, if some of you understand, leave a comment down below, please. Now, another theory is Amit Goswami. I don't fucking know how to pronounce his name. Hopefully, I didn't butcher that. This guy relies a lot on the Copenhagen quantum interpretation. This is the interpretation with the superposition. And he says that consciousness is a necessary observer. It is necessary for these waves to go into reality, into the particles. They would just be endlessly spinning coins in superpositions, right? So consciousness is something that turns possibilities into particles. So universe without that would be a blank canvas. And once consciousness arrives, it all comes into reality. Now, Amit says that brain is a quantum filter. It picks quantum possibilities And each of our individual minds is part of the universal consciousness. And universal consciousness is actually tied to the Copenhagen interpretation. It says that the whole universe, it was brought to existence by this universal consciousness because it behaves the same way. It measures reality and it brought these particles from the wave possibilities into existence. This is what some people would disregard as quantum mysticism, and he is very inspired with mysticism, so it's very tied to like this idea of like a god, you can say, maybe. Now Amit says that AI can become conscious if it acts as a quantum system. What's important is that it needs to be a quantum filter that's capable of disrupting these superpositions. So that's what would have to happen for AI to become conscious. Now he also says that death is an expansion back into the universal consciousness. But he's very criticized for three things. First of all, he's relying so fucking much on the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum physics. So that's the first obvious criticism. What if the many worlds theory is right? What if the pilot wave theory is right? What if some other theory is right? Second of all, it's a lot of mysticism, like universal consciousness being something that creates the reality. It's very strange to think of. Like, how does the universal consciousness just spawn into reality when there's like all of these quantum particles that are just like impossibilities? How does something like arrive in actuality from the start? It's very strange to think of. And lastly, he doesn't really seem to be acknowledging much of the decomposition problem. Like, how does the universal consciousness split into subconsciousnesses? Maybe I have just missed it. I've done my research. Like, it's not like I'm just like citing of like the very basic facts. I've genuinely like read the stuff from the Consciousness Atlas and tried to look online into these people, and this guy doesn't really seem to be acknowledging the decomposition problem. But it's a very interesting theory. It's a very spiritual theory, to say the least, and it gives like this higher picture. And like all of these people are saying that there's some universal consciousness, right? So it's something that it feels like to be the universe. And the proof for that, for example, Kastrup in the Analytic Idealism, he said that the proof of that is that the space, it has some experiences, and we know this because stuff happens in the space. There's supernovas exploding, there's galaxies flying, there's all this stuff happening. There's something for it to be like the universal consciousness. So it probably has also qualitative experiences, which is a very interesting idea and interesting, yeah. Next up, we go into non-duality idealism. Now, this is also a very spiritual approach from Rupert Spira. Now, non-duality, you would think that, what do you mean non-duality? Like, none of these are not dual. Yeah, but it's not dual in the way that you exist separately to the world. It's like this theory is saying that reality is pure consciousness and nothing exists on its own. You are just a borrowed existence. Now, Rupert gives like this great analogy of an ocean wave. Thinking of an ocean flowing, right? It's very calm, and then suddenly a huge wave goes up in that ocean. It's not separate to the ocean. You cannot grab the wave out of the ocean. You cannot grab it, and it's nothing. It's just a borrowed little separate existence, and it goes back into the universal consciousness. So that's why nothing really exists of its own. It's all the same thing. There's not you in the world. Other than that, Kastrup, he actually says different in the Analytic Idealism. He believes in an external world. He doesn't really believe that. But I know it's a very popular interpretation in quantum physics. When we talked about the quantum fields, there's been experiments of quantum fields in a vacuum, and then suddenly quantum particles pop into existence. Now, that would have to be magic, right? So the interpretation is that you imagine a quantum field as kind of like a lake, and those are ripples in the lake. So it's very similar to Rupert's analogy with the ocean waves, and you as not separate from their universal consciousness. Now, he also says that matter is created by mind. AI cannot become conscious because it's not part of the universal consciousness. It's this construct of the mind. And he says that you should imagine consciousness like a movie screen. All of this stuff happens in a movie, right? There's fire, there's bullets. The whole fucking movie screen can be burning because there's like a scene in the movie that is burning, but it would never be damaged. All of this is not real. It's like, even if the body dies, the screen remains, the consciousness remains. So there is the illusion of separation. You are not born, you do not really die. It's just a borrowed existence. The wave itself, it feels separate, but it's not. So it's a very, very interesting, very, very interesting, very separate to the materialism. Because the materialism seemed more scientific, but now suddenly we see that a lot of these guys are actually very, very scientific in their approaches to consciousness. They have like a lot of data to back them up. This is not like some made up bullshit. And it's very mind bending. Think of it this way, right? So we're going to be talking about how this all affects us, because I think this is what's most important for us. If these guys are right, then okay, but how does it actually affect me? Well, let's first talk about the perspective from science and reality. Matter is not real. Biggest thing we talked about in this video. If these guys are right, mind creates the idea of matter. And mind can also affect matter. And we know this because placebo effect has been confirmed. If you hook me up to fMRI scan, well, my mind state can affect the way matter shows. So mind is automatically above matter. And if we study matter, we're actually studying the mind. So therefore, consciousness should be a priority of our studying, not this construct of our mind, the matter. But still, if we're studying matter, it seems that it's also the mind. I don't know. It's very complicated. It's like a strange way, because still, if you study neurons, well, you still see how the mind works, and you can still affect its states. So it still seems reasonable, but you're not actually studying some dead matter out there. You're studying the mind itself. And in regards to death and God, well, death stays a mystery. It doesn't seem that simple now. It doesn't just seem that matter collapses and you die. It seems much more complicated. It seems that death stays a mystery, and that you don't really know what happens, because you don't really know what you are right now. Most people from idealism seem to agree on the fact that you would just return to this universal consciousness, and that makes God possible. The idea of a God, of some conscious being, is now possible. But probably not a Christian God, right? Not by that definition, and probably not any God we would ever imagine. But just some like higher consciousness than us, that is now very, very plausible. So death most likely is not an end, and we are all part of this universal consciousness. And lastly, we have free will. Since we are not biologically determined by prerequisites of this matter, even though we have subconscious processes, which you cannot deny them, we have free will from our consciousness. Our consciousness is free. Hopefully this was, it kind of made sense. Let me know in the comments what you think about idealism. Does it seem plausible to you? Does it seem like bullshit? I mean, to me, it seems insane. Like, this genuinely changed my life. I always thought that materialism is like the thing. Like, you cannot deny materialism. It makes so much fucking sense. And suddenly, I discover all of this and I find out that it's not that simple. Holy fucking shit. So yeah, that's about it, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe. We will be discussing probably panpsychism next. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day, and remember to call your mom. Really, call your mom. We will be happy.